There was a moment, maybe sometime in the late 1950s or early 1960s, when a yellow Western Union envelope arrived at your front door. The boy who delivered it rode a bicycle. He handed it to you without a word, or maybe with just a nod. And you stood in the doorway, holding something that felt heavier than paper. A telegram meant news. It meant someone had taken the time to compose a message carefully, because every single word cost money. You read it slowly. People always read telegrams slowly. For most of its life in America, the telegram was the fastest way to send a word across a distance. And then, like so many things that once felt permanent, it was gone. The last American telegram was sent in 2006. But the real disappearance happened long before that. By the time the final message went out, almost nobody noticed. To understand why telegrams disappeared, you have to understand what they actually were. Not just technically, but emotionally. Because a telegram was not simply a message, it was an event. The telegraph network in America was one of the great technological achievements of the 1800s. By the time the Civil War ended, wires stretched from coast to coast. They connected cities and towns and small depots in a web of copper that let words travel at the speed of electricity. Western Union, founded in 1851, became the dominant force in the business. By the early 1900s, their offices were a fixture of American downtown life. They sat alongside drugstores and barbershops and hotel lobbies as one of the essential services a town could offer. Sending a telegram was a specific errand. You walked into the Western Union office, which often smelled of ink and the faint hum of machinery. A clerk sat behind a counter. You wrote out your message on a form, counting your words carefully, because the price was set by the word. The clerk then tapped out your message in Morse code, or later transmitted it through a teletype machine. Within minutes, it was received at an office near the person you were sending it to. A messenger, usually a young man on a bicycle, was then sent to deliver it by hand. The whole process, city to city, often took less than an hour. The telegram had its own language and rhythm. Because words were expensive, people stripped their messages down to the bare essentials. They left out articles, dropped pleasantries, and communicated in a kind of urgent shorthand. A typical message might read, "Arriving Friday, stop, meet me at station, stop, love, mother." The word "stop" was used to mark the end of a sentence because punctuation cost extra. Reading a telegram from that era, you feel the compression of it, the effort to say exactly what needed to be said and nothing more. People sent telegrams to announce births and deaths, to confirm business deals, to propose marriage, to say they had arrived safely after a long journey. Soldiers sent them home from training camps. Families waiting on news from a war used them to learn whether someone was alive or not. Department stores used them to confirm large orders. Businessmen used them to seal agreements across hundreds of miles in a single afternoon. For decades, the telegram was the only tool in ordinary American life that could move urgent information faster than a person could travel. There was also something ceremonial about receiving one. A letter could wait on the hall table for a day before anyone got around to opening it. But a telegram arrived in your hand with the clear sense that it required attention right now. The yellow envelope, the folded paper inside, the short and serious language, all of it created a small moment of urgency. Even good news delivered by telegram felt electric. And then the telephone changed everything. Not overnight, and not all at once, but steadily and completely. The telephone network in America had been around since the 1870s, but for decades it was expensive, unreliable over long distances, and far from common.
Many American homes did not have a telephone until well into the 1940s. Long-distance calls were a luxury. Placing one meant going through an operator and sometimes waiting several minutes just to get a connection. The telegram stayed competitive because even if you had a phone, calling someone 3 states away was still a complicated, costly, and often frustrating experience. But through the 1950s, the telephone network expanded dramatically. The cost of long-distance calls dropped. Direct dialing without operators became the standard. Suddenly, you could pick up your phone and hear another person's voice within seconds from anywhere in the country for a price most families could manage. The telegram's greatest advantage had always been speed. Now, the telephone was not just as fast, it was faster. And it gave you something the telegram never could: a voice, a tone, a real human presence. Western Union tried to adapt. They introduced singing telegrams in the 1930s, a novelty that had its moment. They moved into money transfer services, which eventually became their main business. But their core product, a written message delivered by a courier, had no real answer to the telephone. And later, no answer to the fax machine. And later still, no answer to email. Each decade brought something faster, cheaper, and more personal than a piece of paper handed over at the door. By the 1970s, Western Union offices were closing across the country. Locations that once had been as common as a post office became rare, then scarce, then gone entirely. That bicycle messenger with the yellow envelope faded from American memory so gradually that most people cannot pinpoint when they last saw one. The telegram did not die in a single moment. It simply became less and less necessary, month by month and year by year, until the system that supported it was too expensive to keep running for an errand almost nobody needed anymore. The last commercial telegram service in the United States, operated by Western Union, sent its final message on January 27, 2006. There was no ceremony, no announcement in most newspapers, no moment of public reflection. Something that had once been at the very heart of American communication went quiet, without anyone gathering to watch. What was lost, beyond the object itself, is something harder to name. The telegram forced a kind of care. You could not send one carelessly. Every word was considered. Every message was edited down to its true meaning. There was a discipline to it, and a weight. When news arrived in that form, you took it seriously because it had cost someone something to send it, in time, in money, and in the concentrated effort of saying only what mattered. We communicate now in seconds, in fragments, in a constant stream of words that often say very little. The ease is real, and the speed is remarkable. But somewhere in the back of certain memories, there is still the feeling of standing in a doorway, holding a folded piece of yellow paper, reading something that mattered, written by someone who meant every word, because they had paid for every one. If this brought back a memory, or if you have a grandparent's telegram still tucked away somewhere, leave it in the comments below. And if you enjoy spending time with these small, forgotten corners of American life, please consider subscribing. There are many more of these stories still worth telling.